Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time. This is the third edition of my Bookshelf Essentials History Department series, where I pick 20 history books that I think are essential for any kind of history collection. So if you are interested in buying history books, and you have got an interest in history, then these 20 books I think are essential. And it bounces off something that David Wiley started when he looked at his shelves and thought about his own bookshelf essentials, not necessarily looking at history books, but mostly fiction, I think, with David Wiley. And then a few other people have done it, lots of other booktubers have done it, and I'm doing it just strictly on history books to celebrate history, and as a nod to the Historathon as well, which was created by Vin at Revenant Reads. And it's just a way of me celebrating history books again. And with this one, number 3, I'm looking at Henry Mayhew's London Labour and the London Poor, which it's another chunky book, and it's absolutely essential. If you want to know about 19th century London, this is a fantastic way of learning a lot. There's a lot of detail in it from someone who was actually there. So Mayhew is not a historian. Mayhew is not a historian looking at the past from distant lenses. Henry Mayhew lived at the time. He is documenting what he sees around him, which makes this a very valuable primary source for history. And it's really, really detailed. It's fantastic. It really is. So I'm going to kind of pick a random part of the actual main part of the text, and I'm going to go back to the introduction and say a little bit more about Henry Mayhew. So there's loads of different small chapters about specific parts of London life. So each little bit is a few pages, and there's so much detail that, you know, it's a big, what is it, 600 and something page book with that much detail in it. And this is a section which is called Education of the Coster Lads. And the Coster Lads were young boys who would buy in the cheapest market and sell in the dearest market. There are a few lads whose training extends beyond this. The father is a tutor who takes the boy to the different markets, instructs him in the art of buying, and when the youth is perfect on this point, the parent's duty is supposed to have been performed. Nearly all these boys are remarkable for their precocious sharpness. To use the words of one of the class, these young ones are as sharp as terriers and learns every dodge of business in less than half no time. And there's one I know's about 3 feet high, that's up to the business as clever as a man of 30. Though he's only 12 years old, he'll chaff down a peeler so uncommon severe that the only way to stop him is to take him in charge. That's the kind of language that you've got in this book. It's so real. It's so real. It is idle to imagine that these lads, possessed of a mental acuteness almost wonderful, will not educate themselves in vice if we neglect to train them to virtue. At the youthful age, the power of acquiring knowledge is the strongest, and some kind of education is continually going on. If they're not taught by others, they will form their own characters, developing habits of dissipation and educing all the grossest passions of their natures, and learning to indulge in the gratification of every appetite without the least restraint. As soon as a boy is old enough to shout well and loudly, his father takes him into the streets. Some of these youths are not above 7 years of age, and it's calculated that not more than 1 in 100 has ever been to a school of any kind. The boy walks with the barrow or guides the donkey, shouting by terms with the father, who, when the goods are sold, will, as a reward, let him ride home on the tray. The lad attends all markets with his father, who teaches him his business and shows him the tricks of the trade. For, said Acosta, a governor in our line leaves the knowledge of all the dodges to his son, just as the rich covers do their tin. The life of a coster boy is a very hard one. In summer, he will have to get up by 4 in the morning, and in winter, he's never in bed after 6. And when he returns from the market, it's generally his duty to wash the goods and help dress the barrow. About 9, he begins his day's work, shouting whilst the father pushes. and as very often the man has lost his voice, this share of the labour is left entirely to him. And when Acosta has regular customers, the vegetables or fish are all sold by 12 o'clock. And in many Costa families, the lad is then packed off with fruit to hawk in the streets. And when the work is over, the father will perhaps take the boy to a public house with him and give him part of his beer. Sometimes a child of 4 or 5 is taken to the tap room, especially if he be pretty and the father proud of him. I have seen, said Acosta to me, Henry Mayhew, a baby of 5 years old wheeling drunk in a tap room. His governor did it for the lark of the thing, to see him chuck himself about, sillified like. It just wants you to keep reading. The love of gambling soon seizes upon the Costa boy. Youths of about 12 or so will soon, as soon as they can get away from work, go to a public house and play cribbage for pints of beer, or for a pint a corner. They generally continue playing till about midnight, and rarely, except on a Sunday, keep it up all night. It's just fantastic. It really is. So I'm just going to... I won't go straight to Henry May. I want to just go through the contents page, actually, because it's quite revealing in itself. So, as I said, these are really short little chapters. And I'll just read out some of the things that you can find in this book. There's a whole massive section on street folk. So the first big chapter, big section, is street folk. And some of the subheadings, wandering tribes in this country, costermongers and other street folk, habits and amusements of costermongers, gambling, the politics of costermongers and policemen, marriage, religion, language of costermongers, the nicknames of costermongers, the literature of costermongers, the slang of the weights and measures, the life of a Costa girl. So it's these kind of things that are in this first chapter. And then there's a chapter or a section called Minorities of the Street Irish. That's one chapter. Of the causes which have made the Irish turn costermongers. Of the religion of the Street Irish. The homes of the Street Irish. Irish lodging houses for immigrants. The history of some Irish street sellers. The street Jews. The trades and localities of the street Jews. Of the Jew street seller, the pursuits, dwellings, traffic of the Jew boy street sellers, of the street Jewesses and the street Jew girls, of the synagogues and the religion of the street and other Jews, the politics, literature and amusement of the Jews, the Negro crossing sweeper who had lost both his legs, the Negro cook. So this is all in the minority section. The next one, the voices of the poor, street sellers of wet fish, street sellers of sprats, street sellers of fruit and vegetables. These are all these sections contain actual quoted language of these people. The London flower girls, the street sellers of baked potatoes, the cats and dogs meat dealers, the muffin man, street orators, the street buyers. I'm skimming lots of this. There's so many. Flushermen, cesspool sewer men, chimney sweeps, asylums for the houseless poor, homeless painter, homeless tailor. And then you've got another big section, the London labour market and this casual labour problem. And then this includes subheadings like of the casual labourers among the rubbish carters, the effects of casual labour in general, casual hands among the scavengers, the London dock, the problem of low wages. And then there's another one, sights of London, the orange and nut market, the London street markets on a Saturday night, the Sunday morning markets, the London dock, the West and East India docks, and St. Catherine's dock. So this is a little bit more like laying out the setting, if you like. And then there's a big one here, culture and belief, punch talk, the punch man at the theatre, the history of punch, Guy Fawkes, Silly Billy, the experience of a street bookseller, street vocalist, Street Negro Serenaders, the statement of another Ethiopian serenader, the wooden-legged sweeper. These are all real people that Henry Mayhew would have spoken to. The next one, The Poor at Home, Poverty in a Domestic Economy, The Life of a Street Seller of Dog Collars, The Home Comforts of a Cat's Meat Carrier. The next one, Paupers and Criminals, London Vagrants, Characteristics of the Various Classes of Vagrants, Statement of a Returned Convict. And then another one, Classifications of the Workers and Non-Workers. And then the last section is Answers to Correspondence, Money Donated for the London Poor, The Causes of Prostitution. So fascinating. A Letter from a Bricklayer's Labourer. And you've got 3 appendices. You've got Appendix 1, which is the bibliography of Henry Mayhew's stuff. And then you've got, like, hold on, I'll show you what you got here at the back. Yeah, these are all the sources that Henry Mayhew's used that are listed at the back there as well. But there's loads of statistics as well within the book. It's not just descriptions of their life. It's an absolutely amazing book. This is the Wordsworth edition, but there's lots of ways you can get it. The London Labour and London Poor by Henry Mayhew. And as I said earlier, I do want to give you some information about Henry Mayhew himself. So let's go back to that for a second, just to finish off this video. Because he's a contemporary of Charles Dickens, there's a comparison here in the introduction with Charles Dickens. Where are we? Mayhew was remarkably sensitive to the language of the poor, to the burr of the Irish, the cries of the costermongers, and the spiel of the patterers. The decision to represent Londoners through the demotic, which dropped H's and displaced V's, but minus the generous use of expletives, served to enliven the text, suggest the authenticity of its narratives and accuracy of its findings, and express forms of social criticism which might otherwise be deemed unseemly or improper. No previous writer had succeeded in presenting the poor through their own stories and in their own words. Even Dickens found Mayhew's work suggestive. The London Labour and London Poor is in fact closer to literature than it's sometimes imagined. To pass from one to the other, writes one authority, is merely to cross sides of the same street. Knowledge of Mayhew persuades us that Dickens, the comic caricaturist, is in essence a great realist, just as reading Dickens persuades us that Mayhew was not entirely a fine reporter, but a superb artist. Mayhew was born on the 25th of November 1812, and his father was a successful London solicitor, a stern autocratic man. His mother remains a shadowy figure. 7 of the 17 Mayhew children were boys, and all joined their father's practice, and all, with one exception, abandoned the law for journalism. Yeah, there's little bits more here about many of those sons, one of his brothers, contributed to regular newspapers and journals, or participating in the founding and editing of miscellaneous money-making ventures. Yeah, so there we are. Henry Mayhew, London Labour and London Poor. Really, really good book if you are interested in this period of English history. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, everybody.